Hey everyone, welcome to today's session. Um, all right, so we're going to talk about debating artificial intelligence. And just as a disclaimer, I am not necessarily an artificial intelligence expert. I am, however, very big on understanding artificial intelligence. I'm a huge fan of the technology, but also someone who has tracked a lot of developments across artificial intelligence. So I know, I would say, quite a bit in terms of like what the average reasonable person should know from the perspective of debating. I think that is important from the perspective of the fact that when it comes to artificial intelligence, you will be judged by not experts when you're debating, right? Unless you have to be very lucky and you're judged by David Africa, who is actually studying artificial intelligence. Unless that is true, you will be probably judged by someone who has some general knowledge about artificial intelligence, and you need to be able to learn some of the technical stuff, but be also able to translate these things into more um, actionable points that you can then later use to sort of explain things within the debate. I will ask you guys if you guys have any specific questions about artificial intelligence. I do obviously have prepared a presentation for you guys, but if you guys have any specific questions for me throughout the session, I'll ask you guys to either post it in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask. If you do have any questions in the middle of when I'm presenting, either raise your hand or post it in the chat, and I will try to make sure that I address them. So even if it's like, oh, I want to talk about job losses, or I want to talk about I want you to talk about um, maybe the ethics behind AI development or whatever it is, you can just post it in the chat or raise your hand and ask me those questions. I think that will make it quite interactive from that perspective. But also, if you have anything to add or if you have any question to ask in the middle of the workshop, I would ask you guys to raise your hand and then ask me so that it doesn't interrupt the flow for the others. I will give you guys a chance to interact whenever that is possible. Cool. All right. Let's start with the session. So how to debate artificial intelligence? I'll start with the introduction to artificial intelligence, and then we'll go about understanding how to kind of debate it and wrestle with some of the key issues that faces artificial intelligence today. So what is AI to begin with? Artificial intelligence is a technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and autonomy. And if you look at the list of these things, human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and autonomy, it kind of goes on a sequence of kind of easy to hard, not exactly in that order, but somewhat, where autonomy is probably the hardest thing when it comes to simulating and emulating what a human does. But human learning is not that difficult to do. For example, artificial intelligence is pretty well equipped to handle things like translations, where you need to know two languages and you can kind of translate from one language to the other. So artificial intelligence is very good in sort of going about translations, comprehension, understanding, problem solving. So it's very good at going through those things. So AI is something that is very good in that sense, in sense of understanding these things that humans generally would otherwise understand. So we can look at the timeline of artificial intelligence. So the first artificial intelligence was actually in the 1950s, but at the time it didn't really do much except for do things like complicated calculations and stuff. In those times, supercomputers were like huge like buildings that were filled with like machinery that supported the computing power. In the modern era, this smartphone that I'm holding is more powerful than any supercomputer that was in the 1950s. So you can only imagine the level of technological progress that we have made. In 1980s, we figured out machine learning. And just to be clear, if you guys have done at least even basic statistics, you would have learned this thing called regression. Regression is the most basic form of machine learning, where from a couple of variables, we can understand what the outcome is. So for example, once you have a bunch of data and you put it into a regression model, you can do predictive analytics. So for example, if you do sales data based on the amount of people, the number of people who have entered your store, for the last 40 years, you can do a regression model saying, okay, in the next year, the likely number of people entering the store is this much, and then the amount of sales is this much based on a few other variables that you put in. That's just to give you an example of like understanding of what is machine learning. And slowly we moved into things like deep learning, and the most recent thing is generative AI, which has taken over the world almost with a storm, I would say, where ChatGPT is something that I don't know if you're using it. If you aren't, you definitely should. Not necessarily ChatGPT. You can use Gemini. You can use um, Mistral. You can use Perplexity. Whatever that you're using, you should be using Gen AI models because slowly that's where the world is headed, and you should be familiar with these tools. At the same time, you shouldn't overuse it, but we will talk about that later. How does artificial intelligence work now? Obviously, if I'm to show to you how artificial intelligence works, it's going to take the entirety of the session. We don't want to do that. We just want to basically understand how this works at a very rudimentary level. If you look at the image on your screen right now, you will see that there is an input layer and then there's an output layer. And in the middle, there are multiple hidden layers. This is very important because people who have programmed AI and people who have written sort of the different dimensions of AI, they themselves are not entirely sure what these multiple hidden layers do because they have coded it to an extent, but the way in which all the codes interact with each other and then create so many simulations within itself, they don't exactly know why ChatGPT is able to answer things the way that it is able to. For example, if you give ChatGPT a riddle, it's going to do a lot of word matching to come to a conclusion about that riddle. But if you ask an AI scientist how exactly it did that, the AI scientist will not be able to give you 100% explanation of how it did. Just to give you an example, if you did 2 plus 2 in a calculator and you got 4, a scientist will be able to explain to you how the calculator was able to come to that conclusion of 2 plus 2 equals 4. But if you ask an AI scientist how they came to the conclusion of how the ChatGPT actually formed this answer, to a large extent, they may not be able to answer your questions. And definitely, they won't be able to answer 100% of your question with clarity. They may be able to explain most of it, but they will not be able to explain all of it. And we will talk about that in a bit as well in terms of understanding AI as a black box, but just to give you an idea of how it works. But what are LLMs? I've kind of jumped into after AI LLMs because that's one of the biggest things in the world of AI today. Obviously, LLMs are not the only form of AI that is there, but it is the form of AI that right now is the most relevant. LLMs are large language models. ChatGPT, for example, is an LLM. LLMs are essentially next word predictors. For example, if you pick up your phone and you go to messages and then you type, I like, it'll come up with a few suggestions, right? Like, for example, if I pick up my phone now, I have no idea what it'll say. Actually, I have autocomplete off in my phone, so not a good idea. But if you want to, you can pick up your phone now. You can write I like, and the next word is going to be an autocorrect prediction of whatever it is that it wants to predict as later from either iPhone or Android. And LLMs are essentially a much more sophisticated version of that. Obviously, they're not the same because when it comes to autocompletes, they're very limited in the sense that they will say I like something dash. Say, for example, will say I like Pokemon. If you've chatted about Pokemon with your friends for a while now, say for the last 4 days, and it just makes that prediction on that basis. But what ChatGPT does is far more complex than that. But why am I saying other LLMs are essentially next word predictors in a way? It's because what it does is generally look back at a few words in their context window and then from a dictionary come up with the highest probability for the next word. This is true for autocomplete, but this is to a certain extent also true for LLMs. What do I mean by this? If you look at this, if you look at the right side of the screen where there is a graph and there's a lot of charts of like a lot of words kind of mapped into it where there's like grandfather, woman, man, girl, boy, child, infant, so many words. What ChatGPT does is after it predicts the first few words, it keeps predicting, and it keeps forming the whole sentence on the basis of that. For example, if I write, what is the definition of artificial intelligence? ChatGPT will look through its entire knowledge base go like, okay, the words that have been used are artificial intelligence definition. And that means that I'll have to define artificial intelligence in a specific way. And then to define artificial intelligence in a specific way, what words should come after the other? And after each word, it will do a probability analysis of what word should come after this. For example, if it says artificial, say for example, let's take this definition. Artificial intelligence is, and then it'll go, it can be technique, technology, computer, machine, and then it'll go, okay, technology has a 0.3 probability, machine has a 0.2 probability, technique has a 0.1 probability, which means the highest probability is technology, and then it will fill up the word technology afterwards. So that's essentially how it works. Then the question might be, why am I telling you guys this? The reason I'm telling you guys this is because there's a difference between someone who is actually intelligent versus a chatbot. Because a chatbot isn't necessarily intelligent in the most basic definition of intelligence, where you can do certain things because you understand things like language. It is just doing a probability prediction of words, one after another. There is an analogy about this, which if you want to note down, this would be a good time to note down, which is that, let's say you were locked in a room, right? And in that room, you had a bunch of, let's say we're talking about the language Bangla, because, my mother tongue is Bangla. But you have no idea of Bangla, so you don't understand Bangla at all. However, in that room, there are a few books. Books that match Bangla word symbols with other Bangla words symbolically. So they know that, okay, which word comes after what, which word comes after what. So if you go through the books, you can be able to figure out which word comes after what. There is someone who is passing you a note underneath the door of that room, and there is a Bangla sentence. Reading that sentence, you are doing a combination matching where you're going like, okay, these are the words that they said. Now I'm going to put this word next to this word, next to this word, next to this word, and I'll just write down the words one after another based on the books that I've seen. You do not understand the language. You just know how to match words within that language. And you pass out scripts to that person. That person may think they're having a conversation with someone who actually understands Bangla, who actually knows the language. But in reality, they're not. They're essentially talking to someone who is matching symbols in a book, right? I know this is a bit of a simplistic example, but this is to show that the person inside the room actually does not understand Bangla. They just can match symbols one after another. And that's essentially what LLMs are. That's essentially what large language models and chatbots do. They're not actually intelligent. They can do probability matching. But does that mean that, they are not useful, or does that mean that they are not able to do smart things? Absolutely not. It does. They do end up accomplishing a lot of things that would amaze you. That'll be like, oh my God, I don't think I could have been able to accomplish it myself. But this particular chatbot, if I give it certain parameters, it's able to solve this problem. It's able to write out this particular report that would have taken me like 2-3 hours to write myself. And even then, the language wouldn't be as crisp or as nice as the one that ChatGPT has given me. They can absolutely accomplish those things. But at its core, we need to understand what it is. And it is just a probability matching application that is incredibly complex, at the same time incredibly opaque, because you have no idea how it works, because it works so fast and uses so many nodes and so many web connections within itself, like the image right here. So it can be quite opaque and complex. Given that this is true, we can conclude a few things. Chatbots and these machines are highly dependent on training data. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that the data that is fed to these chatbots are incredibly crucial in how it responds. The reason ChatGPT is able to do such fabulous work is because ChatGPT was trained in almost all of human knowledge in a way, right? ChatGPT was probably, we don't know this, and the makers of ChatGPT will never admit to this, but we can kind of understand that they did this, which is they fed it books that have been written for centuries, decades. They fed it things like New York Times issues for years on end, Economist issues for years on end, just to give it an idea of what word comes after what word and how to write well. And through that, it became kind of smart in the sense that it is able to understand how the human language works, whether it be English or any other language. Obviously, it's best operated in English because that's the most available language in terms of training data. But that's precisely the point, right? The reason it's good in English is because it has so much training data in English. And this training data is incredibly important when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now that you understand all of this, what are some current AI problems and mitigations? Let's go straight kind of into debate stuff and debate land and debate world about artificial intelligence. Because what we've understood so far is that AI is opaque, AI is complicated. We oftentimes do not understand how AI responds to certain problems and how it is able to solve certain problems. And AI is highly dependent on training data. Those, yes, can lead to great AI models, at the same time can lead to a lot of problems as well. And the question is, what are these problems? The first one is called the black box problem. And this is a characterization of AI that you might have to use if you're opposing something that's related to AI. For example, I think I saw a motion a few days back about replacing financial models that categorize whether or not someone should get a loan or like financial credit models with AI. And the problem with doing that, the problem with increasing the power of AI within a particular field is that there is still the problem of the black box, where we do not know how the AI is coming up with this. We do not know how the AI is saying this person should be getting a loan and the other person should not be getting a loan. Like here, as I use as an example, why AI denying a loan without explainability can be a problem. Because here's the thing, if humans do it, and the human goes like, you know what, your credit score is low, I don't see enough income, that's why I've rejected your loan. That's something that is explainable, that's something that is accountable, that's something that is good for the person who is applying for that loan and wants to have a mental piece of, okay, I applied for this loan and I may not understand why you have rejected it, but at least you've given me an explanation and I'll try to understand. I'll try to maybe improve my behavior to match that, right? Whereas the AI itself may not be as transparent as the human. There are obviously some mitigations to this. One is that you can develop, by the way, we still haven't developed a 100% explainable AI, even though I've put this in the slide. This comes with an asterisk of we can try to develop it. I'm not sure if there's a guarantee that we will be able to develop it. You can, however, use simpler interpretable models where feasible, where you may not have a 100% explanation of how it's doing things, but like as long as you have a 90% explanation, it's kind of fine. And that can be done through regulations, right? And regulations is one of the most important things within artificial intelligence, where you go like, look, obviously, if you're using artificial intelligence in a critical sector like finance, it's going to be highly regulated. And the regulators are going to have a few parameters and things that you have to set within the AI for it to be acceptable within this particular area. And that can also be a mitigation to that. But it is true that AI does have a black box problem. You can, on the other hand, say that, look, even if AI has a black box problem, AI can deny a loan. At the same time, you can ask that same AI, why did it deny the loan, and ask the AI to give suggestions about what can this person do to perhaps get a loan in the future. Which means that even if AI is not explainable in how it's coming up with these answers, it itself is able to give you solutions to the problems that are caused by not being explainable, which is that the reason we want it to be explainable is so that we can understand maybe how it's coming up with this and what can we do to change our circumstances. But if it's able to answer these questions anyways, with or without explainability, I'm not sure why AI being a black box is a big problem. I'm telling you guys this because sometimes when a particular argument is made, we so accept that, you know what, this is a problem and we probably cannot rebut the core of that particular argument. You can. If someone says AI is a black box and that is a problem, you can question whether or not AI being a black box is the most horrible thing in the world. Like, sure, AI is a black box, but what really is the implication of that? If we can make sure that the AI is like, we can understand why the AI came up with this in our own way, then does AI being a black box really matter? Like, if we can ask the AI, okay, why did you reject this loan? And it actually comes up with a plausible answer. Do we really care how it came up with that plausible answer as long as that answer is actually plausible? I mean, that's debatable, but to me, it seems like at the end, it's fine. That is obviously a bit more of a utilitarian take, but it is what it is. The second one is bias and discrimination. By the way, I would ask you guys to read about it. I think there's a few articles about Amazon using an AI hiring tool that discriminated against women. Well, like CVs, if it seemed like they were women, they would discriminate against it. And there's a good reason why it would discriminate against it. Oh, sorry. Let me rephrase. There's a good reason, as in there is a reason that we can find, and that is the reason that can be explained. Obviously, discrimination against any group on the basis of their inimitable characteristics is wrong. But we can understand why the AI model did it. And according to the AI, that was a good enough reason. Which was that? What was it? When you feed AI hiring data from the last decade, a bit beyond that, and a bit beyond that, even if you don't tell the AI that, look, these are women and these are men, the AI is going to go through the entire CV. The AI is going to look at names, and the AI is going to form a conclusion on certain names are favored more than other names because these people were hired, right? If we make a recruitment AI on the basis of how we have recruited in the past 50 years, it will probably turn out to be racist because hiring in the last 50 years within a lot of countries were probably racist and sexist. And that's the data that we are trying to feed it. Some might say, on the basis of like like through a mitigation or whatever, that we can probably introduce diversity protocols. We can probably black out the names. We can probably take away even the university markers and all of that to reduce discrimination. Here's the thing. You do not know what the AI is making a prediction based on. Like, sure, names is probably obvious. But what if there are other things that it is connecting dots about? For example, say in the hobby section of your CV, obviously men are more likely to put sports. Women are more likely to put, say, things like fashion. And it realizes that more people who have been putting sports as a hobby has been hired. Therefore, we should hire more people who have put in sports. In the modern age, I don't know if this will particularly result in a discrimination based on gender, but it will create a discrimination based on preference, where if you prefer sports, then you're more likely to get a job, which has nothing to do with sports. So if that is true, then for recruitment, AI probably shouldn't be used, given the fact that there is so many problems. Having said that, the way AI is developing and the way it's becoming more sophisticated day by day, there is a possibility that through having humans in the loop when AI makes this decision or when AI is fed this training data, if there is enough legal accountability, if there is fairness audits being conducted, there is a possibility we might be able to form AIs that are more suited for things like recruitment, etc. But do be wary of the fact that AI is very prone to bias and discrimination, and setting protocols to not make it biased or discriminatory can be very difficult. The third one is security risks or dual use. Dual use in the sense that it can be used for multiple things at the same time. For example, it can be used as a phishing tool. It can also be used as cyber attacks at the same time, and that can be quite dangerous. AI can be a problem in terms of hacking and a lot of the other malware stuff because of the way in which AI operates and because of the way in which AI is able to very efficiently do things and very fast do things, it can produce malware at a rate that we have not seen ever before. And that's why it's important to invest in AI red teaming, where AI security and AI risk assessment, security deployment frameworks, and all of that, because the potential of AI in terms of cyber attacks is endless, and that can be a huge risk to the system. The last one is data privacy violations. The problem is, to a certain extent, some AI models violate your privacy more than others. For example, the Copilot application for work for Microsoft Office may not violate privacy as much. On the other hand, the ChatGPT application that has data privacy concerns can have issues with data privacy because of the fact that ChatGPT, actually, whenever you sign up for ChatGPT, you kind of give a waiver of whatever you're using is going to it is going to use the train the model. And even on Facebook and Instagram, a lot of your photos and posts can be used to train the AI model unless you've explicitly gone into the privacy section and been like, I don't want my photos or texts to be used to train the AI. And these can constitute a huge amount of data privacy violations that AI does. There are a few ways in which you can kind of make sure that it doesn't violate your privacy. So, for example, you can do things like zero-day retention policies, where if you use this is what to a certain extent Copilot uses in corporate applications, where you use it for a day, and after the day it kind of scrapes everything it has used about you, so it doesn't learn anything about you. It just starts from at the beginning again. That's why, for example, even though ChatGPT is probably the best application, if you think about the government of a particular country, would you want to use ChatGPT for that government, even though ChatGPT is the best application? Probably not, right? Because if ChatGPT is being trained on what you put in, then you don't want to put in secret government stuff into ChatGPT, because then ChatGPT will learn about it, and other people might be able to get it out of ChatGPT, whether it be people working in OpenAI or people outside it. So it's important to have data protection when it comes to AI, because your data can be in the hands of wrong people if you don't use AI properly. And that is always a risk. That is obviously always a risk using any computer application, but that is specifically true for AI, because when it comes to AI, the data goes to a particular server that the AI is using. Oftentimes, you cannot use local servers. There are some AI applications that can run on local servers. In fact, there is an AI application that you can run on your phone. I forgot the name of the app that uses your phone as the base, and it uses like it can run an AI privately, and it runs a very basic model of an AI, but you will see how the phone heats up if you ever use that. It's scary. The amount of power and the amount of computing ability that AI takes up. After that, we have two more issues. One is environmental impact. And I guess you know from now on that there's two big problems when it comes to AI and the environment. One is it uses a lot of electricity. GPT-3 required an estimated 1,287 megawatts to train, which is the equivalent of the average American household using electricity for 120 years. 120 years. That's how much electricity it consumes. And AI data centers can strain local electricity and water systems. It needs water because the servers heat up so much, it needs water to keep itself cool. So there is obviously a lot of research going on. One of the biggest opportunities in the field of renewable energy and AI is the way to build more efficient AI, the way to use renewable energy for AI, and the way to use recycled water for AI. And these are obviously opportunities where it comes to an economic perspective, but also this is a big concern going forward with AI. I do think, however, when it comes to understanding the environmental impact, I'm not sure if this is that relevant within debating, because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where AI, because of its own sophisticated architectures and own sophisticated ways of doing things, might be able to help with things like renewable energy, might be able to help with things like improving technology in terms of like more newer forms of energy like hydrogen and so on, and use a lot of, I would say, and bring sorry not bring but use but rather bring a lot of high technology instruments to these sectors that can help it develop more sophisticated forms of generating energy and electricity. So on net, you can argue that yes, AI has a huge electricity footprint, but at the same time, AI might accelerate our journey towards a greener future, where AI might accelerate the development of things like electric cars and how batteries can retain more charge and can make electric cars a viable alternative to fossil fuel, and so on. So there's obviously that part of the debate and discussion as well. I think there's a question here. No, so this was like the entirety of it, like GPT-3 to train the GPT-3. I'm not sure about the exact timeline, but it required that much megawatt to train. I think you can Google this. It'll probably give you a bit more. But I just wanted to give you an understanding of how much it consumes. The fact of the matter is, it just consumes more than typical applications. So just to give you an example, if you put in a query on ChatGPT asking it something, on average, it will take 10 times as much as a Google search takes. So obviously, when you search on Google and Google goes into its own servers and gives you the answer, it takes a specific amount of energy. The same query on ChatGPT will take 10 times and consume 10 times the electricity. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the energy consumption that happens when it comes to both development and running of AI. There has been one thing, which is that this is the next point, which is that there is a cognitive over reliance on AI that people are developing. If you've been using AI too much, and this is where I talk about using AI too much, then you might be over dependent on AI tools, and that can be quite bad. Because it may erode your critical thinking, your ability to understand things, your ability to comprehend information and make conclusions out of that information, your problem solving skills, etc. And you may think, I mean, what's the point of having all of these skills if you can use AI to do these things anyways? There are a few problems, of course. First is that critical thinking and the ways to solve problems in a novel way is very important for human beings, because we are still yet to solve so many of humanity's problems that we cannot entirely rely on AI. Because AI, at the end of the day, is a collection of human knowledge from the past. It is not necessarily human knowledge that can give us a lot of newer innovation from an idea sense. It obviously can accelerate innovation by making older processes faster. For example, Amazon accelerated a lot of its development by using AI for coding, because AI is so efficient at coding. They say, okay, a human coder would have taken a year to solve this, but through an AI, we've got it done in like a few days. So it can help in accelerating innovation by making older processes, the processes that already existed, faster. But can it come up with an entirely new technology? Like, for example, if you ask AI to build a machine that would be able to convert, say, grass into electricity. I'm just giving you an example. Obviously, that sounds ludicrous. Would it be able to? No, it won't be able to. Would it be able to come up with a form of renewable energy machine that is able to turn wind into more electricity? So obviously, we have windmills. Is it able to make a windmill that is much better? No. But if a team of scientists who are working towards windmills better want to perform certain calculations within the AI, is it able to do that? Yes. But did it come up with those calculations? No. Who came up with those calculations? The scientists did. I'm just giving you an illustration of the fact that AI, while it can do a lot of things, we still rely on humanity's creative power, critical thinking, in order to solve problems that exist in society. So, yes, for the general population, even though, yes, critical thinking is something that is difficult to have, we as human beings still, on some level or the other, have critical thinking, and we should not give away that just because we have AI. Because the once we give away our critical thinking capabilities, then people are able to take advantage of us. Politicians are able to take advantage of us by feeding us absolute lies, which, by the way, is happening already. Like, we have had a bit of a cognitive decline in the sense of through the impact of things like social media, which has led to people believing in things like fake news and this, that, and the other. Obviously, the amount of like examples or research on this can be a bit limited, but generally we know for a fact that people, when they get addicted to things like social media and they get trapped in their bubbles, can form more, say, extreme ideologies due to the influence of social media. So things like that can get worse under AI if we do have a cognitive over reliance on AI, and that's not necessarily a good thing by any means whatsoever. So that's something that definitely is important to look at. Now, any questions, so far? If not, then let's move on to the big topic of the day in a way. Just give me a second. I'll just drink some water. Which is, will AI take over human jobs? Now, obviously, I cannot give you an entire prediction of will AI take over human jobs on net, but there have been research. In fact, there have been research for example, McKinsey had a research that by 2030, AI will take over about 98% of the jobs that exist currently in Australia. I know that's a wild number and that's very difficult to comprehend, but that's the scale at which we're looking at, where will AI take over human jobs? Now, does that mean AI will do 98% of the jobs available during that time? No, that's not what it means. It's saying that AI will take over 98% of existing jobs. That does not necessarily mean that it will take over 98% of all the jobs during that. There is a difference between them. What do I mean by this? In the past, there was this, and this is an example you'll hear a lot when it comes to like technology debates, which is there was this group of people who were known as knocker uppers, and their job was basically this. At a specific point in time, they would go and knock on people's doors to wake them up because alarm clocks were not a thing yet. Like, yeah, they were discovered. Alarm clocks were actually made much before knocker uppers became obsolete, but they were not mass produced yet, where you can just go onto a shop and buy an alarm clock. We don't even have alarm clocks anymore. We just have alarms on our phones that we use. But their jobs were just to, knock on people's doors and wake them up. Now, as soon as alarm clocks were invented, that job kind of became obsolete, right? So, in a sense, alarm clocks were taking over a specific job. But does that necessarily mean that alarm clocks were taking over a lot of the other jobs? Not necessarily. And that's obviously an example of alarm clocks. Let's think of computers. Computers took over so many jobs, right? People who were like using a lot of manual ways of doing certain tasks now did not need to exist after the computer was invented. Like, for example, after the invention of computer and the internet, we didn't need someone to operate the fax machine in offices anymore. Like, there was a fax operator. That was a job. That was a full-time job of someone whose task was to just operate the fax, because there were machines, especially in multinational companies, where you'd use the fax machine so frequently that you would have to kind of go ahead and have someone do that as a full-time job. But computer came over and took over that job. Computer would come over and take over so many other jobs that were there. But the computer, did it also create a lot of jobs? Yes. Computer operators, programmers, computer engineers, this and that and the other. That is an argument that you'll generally hear about AI as well, where people will be like, yeah, but sure, people thought that about computers as well, but it ended up creating more jobs. Here's the problem, however. AI is a whole different entity altogether. AI can do so many things that we at the moment cannot even imagine that it can be done by a machine. For example, AI can right now fully take over the task of an office secretary. What do I mean by this? Someone sends you an email about a particular meeting, right? Say you're the CEO of a company. Someone sends you a meeting saying an email saying, hey, we had a chat, just wanted to schedule a meeting, blah, blah, blah. The AI reads, is this meeting from someone who is credible, like someone within the company? Yes. It goes and looks to your calendar. It finds a slot. It sends over a meeting invite for that slot. This was done by a human being. This is probably still done by a human being right now. Can the AI do it? Yes. Does this involve a lot of complex steps that otherwise a program would not have been able to do it? Like Outlook, for example, would not have been able to do it. You know why Outlook wouldn't have been able to do it? Because if the other person went into their calendar and sent a meeting request, then Outlook might have been able to see if there were any other conflicts and approve that on its own. But if this person is sending an email, and Outlook has to go through that email and understand what's written in that email and then execute this task, it will not be able to do that because that's too many complex steps. Is the AI able to do that? Absolutely, AI is able to do that. And the whole role of office secretaries can be done through that. In fact, the Goldman Sachs CEO said that during an IPO, the level of IPO is an initial product offering where you take a company and you are essentially turning that company into a publicly traded corporation, and you're turning it into the shareholder so that people can buy and sell their shares, right? Very simply. And that process requires a lot of calculations, documentation, and so on. The Goldman Sachs CEO said that 95% of the documentation required for IPO offering can be done by AI. The rest 5% now is the most important 5%. So yes, you need humans for things. You need humans for those 5%. But if there were 20 junior staff working on the IPO offering before, do they need the 20 people now? They barely need 2 people for the task that 20 people were required for. Something that required 20 programmers can be done with 1 programmer now. Like, no joke, the number is probably more than that. But that is a reality, which means that the scale at which AI can displace jobs is much higher than the scale at which AI can produce these jobs. Because the whole point is that AI automates routine tasks to the level of which you need only 1 human being to sort of look after these tasks. And that makes a whole lot of a difference, which means that in a post-AI world, you might be looking at something like universal basic income because it will disrupt a lot of the jobs. Now, whether or not it will create enough jobs, that's still a question mark. Maybe, maybe not. You never know if it will. But that is still yet to be seen. And we still don't know. We're kind of still living through it as we speak about. So I'll go through a few of the concerns and counterpoints just to give you an overview of like the whole AI taking over human jobs debate, right? So obviously, as I said, automation of routine tasks is done. Even white collar disruption. Like, think about it. If you've watched Suits, you will see that the whole specialty of the character, if you have not watched Suits, please do. The whole specialty of the character, Mike Ross, is that he has a photographic memory. He can essentially quote any law book at any point in time and be like, yes, in this law book, this is the law that says this, which means in this case, we win. Right? Essentially, he's doing what an AI can do. If the AI is fed all of these law books, the AI will be able to do what Mike Ross is able to do within seconds. And Mike Ross is a human with a photographic memory, which is probably like 1 in a million human beings. Like most of us, including all of you guys here, do not have a photographic memory. Like if I turned off this slide right now, you wouldn't be able to recall all the words in this slide. But if I feed it to an AI, it will be able to recall all of the words in this slide, which is why it is automating a lot of the professional work, like legal research, writing, diagnostics, and so on. And the speed of adoption is also outpacing a lot of speed of adoption on a lot of things because AI is so easy to adopt. You can run your AI in your computer, right? Previously, computers took so long to be mainstream. I know that you guys are a bit young to understand this. But when I was a kid, I grew up in a household that did not have a computer. Can you imagine a kid growing up in a household without a computer nowadays? It's almost unthinkable. And even if you say, oh, maybe some households don't have a computer, they kind of do. The smartphone is more powerful than a computer was during that era. It's kind of like a computer. The TVs with like the Google TV applications, just kind of like a computer. So households have computers now. But AI adoption took us how many years? Like it's been, so ChatGPT was launched 2022 November. And then say 2023, 2024, we're halfway through 2025, 2.5 years, and everybody's already using it, right? Computer adoption was not this fast. And that is a point of concern. It can lead to widening inequality because at the end of the day, who's going to be the ones having all of these skills to operate AI? People with a lot of money, people who can afford to go to university and so on. And this leads to things like job polarization and so on, which increases social division within society, right? We have a few questions. How can we argue the good of that over dependence on AI? Modern AI is capable to do most of the repetitive tasks. And the question is, are there going to be a large amount of recession. Maybe people will not be update themselves at all. The impact goes into aggregate economy, creating AI disrupt money circulation cycle. How do you refute this? That's a good point. That's good. We are going on to some counterpoints now, just to understand how you tackle those. The first of it is that AI does complement human roles a bit. And what AI does is AI makes a lot of the processes that were otherwise cumbersome a lot better, thereby, in a way, in one way or the other, creating more productivity and positive impact within the economy. What do I mean by this? For example, say for you to build Uber back in 2013 took you so long. Why? Programming Uber, connecting it to Google Maps, building the whole architecture of the app took so long, right? These days, for a startup to take a product from conception to market will take about 1/50th of the time, or even 1/100th of the time. Now imagine how many jobs Uber created, not just as a company, but also the fact that Uber has provided livelihood to so many people who can just have a car and then drive it out, right? That way, so many newer apps and newer ideas can come to fruition and can be made commercially viable just because of the fact that this is on point number 2, new job creation, app development, because of the fact that AI assisted programmers are so much faster than programmers without AI. And these newer ideas have the potential to create a lot of jobs within the economy. Can I quantify it? No. But can I for sure say that this is a phenomenon that is going to be happening? The answer to that question is yes. Because you might be thinking, oh, but yeah, Uber is already a thing, right? What are we essentially talking about? Like, we already have food delivery, we have already have this and that, etc. The thing is, before Uber was a thing, nobody thought something like Uber could be a thing. Like something like Uber can actually create jobs and provide people with their livelihoods. The same way, 5 years from now, there will be a particular app and you'll be like, oh, I never thought this app is going to create so many jobs. But it did, right? And it is doing it at the moment. So AI can create a lot of jobs, and AI can create a lot of jobs really, really fast. The second thing is AI creates a lot of positive impact within the economy by making sure that workers are not too sick, or the workers are essentially being able to work for longer. By that, I mean, the health system is a problem within countries like UK, Canada that have public healthcare systems. There's such a long line of people who want healthcare, etc., that if AI is able to streamline that, then people can indeed become more productive. What happens when people become more productive is they earn more money. They earn more money by executing more tasks, doing more jobs, and they spend more money. They spend more money behind luxury things. They spend more money behind things like traveling, which again, in turn, creates more jobs. And at the end of the day, you need a human, because at the end of the day, you don't want a situation where in your office an AI is executing something and the AI messes up, and the AI obviously is not accountable. The AI is not going to answer to your questions. You need humans in the loop at every stage of the process because you want to hold someone accountable for their tasks. What AI might end up doing, which I hope for the sake of humanity it does, is cut down our work hours. By that, I mean, a programmer had to work, say, 50 hours a week. Now the programmer has to only work 25 hours a week or 20 hours a week. But at the end of the day, you still want the programmer. Why? Because you want someone to review the code that AI has produced. You want someone to debug it. You want someone to run it constantly. And you want someone to be held accountable for if something goes wrong with that app. So from the perspective of accountability and from the perspective of best practices, you still need humans in so many aspects of your job that maybe it will not take away as many jobs as the doomsday predictors are doing it or saying it. And on top of that, you can say, let's say worst case scenario takes away so many jobs, right? At the end of the day, we still need, for the functioning of the economic system, we still need people to have money. Because say AI makes everything faster, our production of everything is really, really fast, and we don't need humans to do things. Say the AIs can run McDonald's on their own, right? Like you have a kiosk, you have a security guard that is an AI robot, you have an AI customer service person there, and AI is able to develop some motor skills that flip burgers and stuff very fast. People need money to go to McDonald's, right? Where will they get their money from if they don't have jobs? So corporations like McDonald's and stuff, they themselves will be like, you know what, it's probably time to do universal basic income. If AI has taken over all kinds of jobs, then it's time to do universal basic income where everyone has the money to at least spend. Because if you don't have the money to spend, how do you keep this economic system running? There's two possible scenarios in that particular case. One, you have something like a universal basic income to make sure that the economy is still running and exists, or two, you dismantle the economic system already, as it is at the moment, and you create an entirely new economic system. I'm not saying that's going to be communism or Marxism, but it has to be much different from what it is right now, because the current economic system needs people to have money, spend money, and circulate that money throughout the economy. So yeah, there's that. What do you think makes AI exclusively addictive, especially compared to why do people continue to use it extensively despite all the harms? It just is so easy to use, and it's let me give you an example. Say, for example, you are making a dish and you realize you only have 8 out of the 9 ingredients required for that dish. You can Google recipes of that dish, probably use the 9 out of the 9 ingredients in the top 5 searches. The seventh search maybe has something that maybe says, okay, the one component that you don't have, you can replace it with this. It takes a lot of effort. You go to the AI, be like, hey, I'm making this. I have only these ingredients available. What do I do now? The AI is going to be like, okay, you don't have this ingredient. Do you have this ingredient instead? You'll be like, yes, I do. Then you might be like, oh, no, I don't have the alternative ingredient either. Then the AI will be like, okay, do you have this instead? And then it will be the one that's prompting you. The entire effort of making this recipe gets cut down into so much that people are then looking at it being like, hey, this is just much easier. And it's not just search. It's also the fact that you can just turn the voice recognition on in your chat GPT or Gemini or whatsoever and have a full-on conversation about, I have only these 8 ingredients, what do I do? And it's gonna be like, okay, do these things. Um and and yeah, that's why people get so kind of addicted to AI and using it, and it's so convenient. It's so much less effort needed to find stuff that you'll have just stopped using Google altogether. So yeah. I mean, I'm not saying people still don't use Google. They still do, obviously, but they're using it much less than they were before. Now, this one is the future is already here. This is a graph which says AI performance on a set of PhD level science questions. Now, before you think the doomsday is here, these are multiple choice questions. These are not essentially the most complicated things to answer because you answer from choices. But what it's showing right now is that it's able to answer at a level that is much better than the expert human level. So an expert human with a PhD who might be a professor might lose out to Gemini 2.5 Pro at answering PhD level science questions, which is why I titled this slide, The Future is Already Here. But before you think too much about it, let's look at another graph. AI performance on a set of simple reasoning tasks where it's given like a puzzle or something of that sort. And in that, it can only do 55% of or not even 55%, like 52, 53%. That is the highest that it can do. The human can do it at an 83%. Even a human that has just a high school degree, not necessarily humans with like advanced degrees or whatsoever. So on reasoning tasks, AI still fall behind human beings because AI capabilities are to a certain extent limited still. Having said that, as you can see, the graph is going up. And in the next 2-3 years, that graph might go up and match human capabilities. And at that point, you might say, yep, now it's becoming a concern. Now companies may be replacing human beings with AI simply because of the fact that a human being is so high maintenance when it comes to employing. An AI will just do things you ask it to do and will never complain about overworking or having like culture, etc. It's just so much easier in terms of that. Companies may say that very, very soon on the basis of what we are seeing in these graphs. And yeah. So yeah, my I kind of have to go in like 2-3 minutes. But basically, my concluding remark, and if you guys have any questions, please ask very fast. My concluding remarks would be a few things. Keep track of AI developments. Make sure that you're keeping track of everything that's happening within the realm of AI. Two is do follow people, especially people who do things like AI, kind of like, what's happening with AI, etc., within either columns in places like the New York Times or say within YouTube, where they're having talks with, say, someone who has worked extensively with AI and now saying, oh, you know what? I'm actually afraid of what AI is going to do. Go in and listen to them. There's so much resource available overall. This session was just to give you the very basic tools for you to now understand how the AI landscape is shaping up and how it's going to affect our lives in the future. Now that you have these basic tools, you can just do a lot more in-depth research, whether it be through articles, whether it be through videos, or any other thing whatsoever. I think the Financial Times generally is pretty good in terms of a lot of the AI stuff. So, for example, I can send you certain articles. Hopefully, you guys will be able to read it. Apologies if there's a paywall. I do have access to it myself, but if you can, like there's a few things, a few content here that you can absolutely look at. In terms of the YouTube channels that I will say, just give me a second. There, there are a few. There are a few stuff about this. Like Big Thing, for example, does some of the stuff about AI. AI, like, there will be a lot of stuff. Like if you just search about it, I think you will find it. I think there was this person, I forgot the name, but essentially this person who moved from Yale to Toronto to talk about, because he was one of the founders of AI, like one of the sort of architects of AI. Um, Let me see if I can find it. Jeffrey Hinton. You should follow Jeffrey Hinton if you can. Um, so Jeffrey Hinton, like, has talked a lot about the problems with AI and stuff. So how to go about debates where you use AI as a replacement for human emotions. Um, Actually, you know what? For this one, there is a debate that you guys should watch. That is the Australs 2019 Grand Final. I think that is it Australs 2019 Grand Final, was it? Or was it 2018? Sorry, actually not 2019. Sorry, 2019 was the no, it was 2018. So Australs 2018 Grand Final. Please watch that. I think yeah, that one is a good sort of idea in terms of that. But do know that AI cannot replace human intelligence and stuff as of yet, and human emotions obviously is very, very difficult. What are your views on AGI, artificial general intelligence? I think AI in terms of AGI is we are still progressing towards it. AGI is going to be very different because it's still at a philosophical level where it's like we don't know yet if AI is going to be able to emulate human emotions, human reactions, and stuff. We're going to have to wait a bit for that still. So I don't have concrete opinions on AGI yet, just as of yet. But yeah, there's a few things with regards to that. I think also look into stuff like AI in terms of AI art and so on. There is yeah, this was just like a general overview of AI stuff. There's so much more to do in terms of AI, and so much more to think about in terms of AI. It's very, very important to sort of have a look at all of those things. But yeah, so you can have a look at this article as well that I've posted here. AI and its impact on critical thinking.